What's the ultimate instant karma story you've seen happen to someone who wronged you? Story 1. I have a relative who was engaged to this really nice dude. He was very hardworking, wealthy, and yet humble. He saved her from poverty, because before she met him, she never wanted to get a proper job after being a high school dropout, complained about not having money, but wouldn't even settle for a fast food job. She will settle for nothing less but jobs like hostess or social escorts. He changed her to be better. Or so we thought. They were about to be married at the end of the year, had everything planned, deposit paid for the new house, about $200,000 by him. Wedding venue and catering also paid, which costed $50,000. They were just waiting for the date. He gave her everything she wanted, gave her monthly allowances, so she doesn't have to work. She had the good life. Then she started refusing to be intimate with him, and one day he found the MSN chat logs on his laptop between her and another guy who she claims is just a best friend. The chats were pretty obvious that they had already been intimate. He decided to break it off with her and lost a bunch of money from planning the wedding and house loans that he never got to stay in. And then she told everyone it was her who broke up with him after he forced her to be intimate with him, which we all know is not true. It also came to suffice that she still asked him for allowances after they broke up, and one time lied that her mom was in the hospital and needed money to help pay. Things were rough for him, and I used to see him trying to sell off the wedding package to someone else. 3 months later, she ended up being pregnant by someone else. The father of the baby had nothing to say other than, "Now you know who I am," and left. She was kicked out of the house by her brother. She told everyone she was SA'd, but told us not to say anything to her brother about it, because the brother knows she wasn't SA'd. And lastly, she now has breast cancer while she is pregnant again. If she had been faithful to the guy, he could have helped her greatly, and her life would have been so much better than this. Before we continue, do us a quick favor, smash that like button and subscribe to support our channel. Story 2. I live in Seoul. Here in Seoul, there are still quite a few people who are openly racist toward foreigners. A lot of them are cab drivers. Technically, there's a law that says cab drivers can't refuse rides to foreigners. But of course, that's nearly impossible to enforce. One night, some friends and I were out hitting the bars and clubs. We got a call from another group of friends in a different part of the city who wanted us to join them. So we headed out of the bar, and as we stepped onto the street, we noticed a few groups trying to hail cabs. Naturally, since this is Korea, we were the only foreigners on the street. We waited, and one by one the other Korean groups got picked up while we were continuously passed over. Finally, we were the only ones left still waiting. A cab came along. Finally, we thought we were getting out of there. The cab started to slow down and pull over as it approached us. But then, a group of Koreans came out of a bar about 100 meters up the street. As soon as the driver saw them, he hit the gas and blew right past us, pulling over instead for the new group. Not surprising, honestly. You get used to that kind of thing. But to make it worse, the Korean group started yelling nasty things at us, mocking us, and laughing for stealing our cab. We went back to waiting. Not 15 seconds later, we heard screeching tires, followed by a loud crash and the sound of shattering glass. We looked toward the direction the cab had gone, and sure enough, the driver had tried to run a red light and got T-boned. Hard. Just then, another cab pulled up and stopped for us. As we passed the scene of the accident, we saw the passengers getting out of the totaled taxi, all looking very annoyed. We waved and smiled as we drove by. Story 3. Man, I'm not proud of this one, but here goes. Once in my life, I have cheated on a girlfriend. We were in a serious, long-term relationship, but she was out of town, and we'd been having some issues in terms of intimacy and other things. But it doesn't really matter. I was at a party for work, and there was an open bar, so I had to have some scotch. Our office secretary apparently is also a scotch drinker, so we got to talking, and then of course we had to drink more scotch, so we'd have more to talk about. And so on and so forth. A few hours later, a few of us all were out at another bar for an after-party of sorts. This one wasn't free. I was near blackout drunk by this point, and this girl, the secretary, pulled me out to the dance floor. I'd say it took us about 15 seconds from that point to start making out furiously in full view of our co-workers, who knew I had a girlfriend, and that secretary girl had a boyfriend. We didn't care. It was probably really sloppy and disgusting, and led to the bouncer shining a flashlight on us, making out to try to get us to leave. So, we did and made out on the street, and in the cab. and in the elevator back up to the office, and in my office, where we had terrible drunken, unprotected banging session on the floor. It wasn't even good. This isn't a Dear Penthouse kind of story. I was basically blackout drunk and didn't even get to finish. She started crying a little after, from the guilt, and I put her in a cab, and we parted ways. I took a cab home myself and got out at the bodega/deli downstairs to get a sandwich, stumbling drunk. And then I have literally no memory from that point on. See, I woke up the next morning in my bed, fully clothed, shoes on, with my head pounding. To be expected. But it wasn't just a headache. I felt my jaw, and it was completely swollen and sore. There was also a huge bump on the side of my head and a little blood on my pillow. From what I could piece together afterward, when I went into the deli, I must have bumped into or otherwise annoyed some bros who were in the deli getting drunk food too. Drunken me probably wasn't very apologetic. And so, Drunken me got punched really, really hard in the face. The bump on the side of my head was from hitting it on the ground when I fell. I wasn't even mad once I realized what had happened. It was sort of like the universe knew I deserved it for cheating on Melly. Karma literally punched me right in the face. On the plus side, secretary girl and I talked about it the next day and agreed it was a mistake and a one-time thing and meant nothing. She's married now, actually. Got engaged a few months after our encounter. Maybe it was a wake-up call for her. It was definitely a wake-up call for me, but in a different way. I told my girlfriend we broke up, and soon after I quit drinking. Story 4. A few years ago, I worked at this high-end hotel as a front desk manager. One night, a guy came in, dressed in an expensive suit, oozing confidence, clearly used to getting whatever he wanted. He checked in, but within minutes started making a scene. He was loud, obnoxious, and demanded upgrades, freebies, and special treatment just because he thought he was important. When we told him no to a last-minute suite upgrade, he flipped. He started insulting the staff, calling us incompetent and trash. He even threatened to get us fired because he knew people. The whole lobby went silent. We were used to rude guests, but this guy was on another level. But here's where things get wild. About an hour later, a call comes in. Housekeeping found something seriously illegal in his room. The cops were called, and they stormed the guy's suite. Turns out, he was running a small drug operation right there in the hotel, using the place to stash and sell. He tried to deny it, but the evidence was overwhelming. He got arrested on the spot. All his fancy suits and swagger meant nothing in handcuffs. And here's the kicker. When they searched his phone, they found hundreds of messages bragging about manipulating people, cheating customers, and exploiting connections to get away with scams. The hotel staff, whom he had insulted and threatened, ended up testifying against him. Every bad word he'd thrown at us came back to bite him. Months later, I heard he got a heavy sentence and lost everything, his job, his money, even his social circle. Watching someone so arrogant fall that hard, so fast, was unforgettable. Karma didn't just knock on his door. It kicked it down, slapped him in the face, and slammed it shut. Story 5. This one's about my aunt, who runs a small shop selling candles and crystals and doing tarot readings in a quiet town. A couple of years back, a new psychic shop opened across the street. At first, my aunt thought it was no big deal. But this new lady, let's call her Dina, was loud, flashy, and extremely shady. She would stand outside and tell people not to go into my aunt's store because it was cursed. She claimed she could remove curses for a fee. Literally tried to scam people out of hundreds of dollars. One day, a customer came to my aunt in tears. Dina had told her she had evil spirits and needed to pay $500 to cleanse her house. My aunt was furious. She told the woman not to pay a cent and explained it was a con. Well, things escalated. Dina started writing fake reviews online, spreading rumors, even going so far as to accuse my aunt of witchcraft, which, ironically, was part of both their branding. It got ridiculous. Here's where karma came flying in. Turns out, one of Dina's recent clients was an undercover local reporter doing a story on spiritual scams. The whole encounter was filmed. They caught Dina faking visions, planting bad energy, items in people's purses, and pressuring them to pay up. The news story went viral in our town. Her shop shut down within weeks. She tried to rebrand under a new name, but everyone recognized her and refused to go. Meanwhile, my aunt's business actually grew because people saw she was the real deal, honest and kind. Karma didn't need a crystal ball to find Dina. Story 6. The bully girl in our preschool class used to run at other kids, making the nastiest face you've ever seen, and then hit them over the head. She was the meanest little kid I've ever met. One day, the shyest boy in the class accidentally upset her. She started charging at him from across the room as fast as she could. Terrified, the shy boy instinctively braced himself against the table behind him and lifted his foot to keep her back. She ran gut first at full speed into the bottom of his shoe, an impact that was basically a karate kick to the stomach. The shy boy had no idea that would happen. He hadn't even meant to defend himself like that. The bully girl went flying backwards and hit the floor, the wind completely knocked out of her. It took her a good 5 seconds just to catch her breath enough to start crying. As for me, the adult on duty, I suddenly became very interested in the wallpaper and pretended not to have seen a thing. That girl needed to learn the hard way, and that shy boy needed to learn that he could stand up for himself. Experience is the best teacher. I let karma rule the day. Story 7. I was on guard duty in the army during an event in my country. One guy in my squad ended up having to be awake for 24 hours straight due to an unfortunate shift change. He asked me to take over his shift, but I didn't want to switch because I had fun squad mates on mine. Instead, I offered to take over 4 hours earlier than his shift so he could sleep earlier. He agreed and went to sleep at 200 hours instead of 600 hours, and was scheduled to replace me at 1400 hours. Around 1000 hours, I started getting really tired, so I told my squad leader to wake the guy a little earlier and have him take the 2 hours from 1200 to 1400 hours so I could get some sleep. I was on passive duty from 1000 hours to 1200 anyway, so I just went to sleep. Well, at 1230, I get woken up. Turns out the guy refused to take the 2 extra hours. Straight up refused. So, I had to get up, get dressed, and return to the outpost, seething with murderous thoughts the entire way. But when I arrived, the place was practically deserted. Not a single soldier in sight. Apparently, the officers had planned a disciplinary secret march, and because I was on guard duty, I didn't have to participate. It was an 80-kilometers march. The whole company passed by the outpost, including the guy who refused to take my shift, looking absolutely miserable. I just smiled through the window at him and mouthed the word karma. Story 8. While working for the fire department, we responded to a multi-vehicle rollover accident on the interstate. We entered the interstate one exit away from the scene, running into traffic, then moved over to the emergency lane with lights and siren on. About halfway there, a BMW suddenly pulled in front of us, trying to cut through traffic without even looking. I immediately blasted the air horn, and the driver came to a complete stop, flipping us the middle finger out the window. I've seen a lot of drivers do stupid things when emergency lights approach, but this guy was just being an a-hole for no reason. He got out of his car and started screaming at us, all while blocking the only fire engine and 2 ambulances available. People were seriously injured just half a mile away, and he was making a stand because we honked at him for blocking us. I glanced in the mirror and saw a highway patrol officer running between lanes toward us. He was clearly furious. BMW guy was immediately arrested, his fancy car was pushed out of the way into a ditch, and he was taken to jail. Meanwhile, at the accident site, people were badly hurt, and 2 vehicles had to be cut open to extricate passengers trapped in the mangled wreckage. Story 9. A few years ago, I was working at a small tech startup. We had this new guy join the team. Let's call him Mike. Mike was super cocky from day one, acting like he knew everything about software development and how the company should run. He constantly talked over people in meetings and dismissed anyone else's ideas. It was really frustrating because most of the team were patient and just tried to ignore him. One day, our lead developer asked Mike to help troubleshoot a critical bug in the code. Mike insisted that he had a foolproof solution and started rewriting the entire module from scratch without consulting anyone. The rest of us were hesitant but figured, okay, let him try. Big mistake. Mike's fix ended up breaking half the features in the app, and the product manager had a meltdown because we were about to push an update the next day. The lead developer had to scramble to revert the code, working late into the night to fix the mess Mike made. Now, here's the kicker. Mike acted like none of it was his fault. He blamed the team for not supporting his brilliant idea and started gossiping around the office about how incompetent everyone else was. Fast forward a few weeks, the company hired a consultant to review our codebase. The consultant immediately flagged the module Mike rewrote as a disaster, full of bugs and poor architecture. The CEO was furious and called Mike into a meeting. After that meeting, Mike was put on probation and was required to work under direct supervision. He lost a lot of respect from the team and was no longer the loudest voice in the room. Here's the best part. A couple months later, Mike's arrogance caught up with him again. During a big client demo, he tried to show off a feature he had perfected. But instead, the feature crashed the entire app in front of the clients. Everyone was embarrassed, and the client threatened to pull their contract. Mike was finally let go shortly after. The entire office felt a sense of karmic justice. He spent so much time acting superior and undermining the team, and it all came crashing down because of his own reckless pride. Story 10. I went to Hawaii with my mom and stepfather for vacation. I was 12, and we signed up for surfing lessons. On the car ride there, my stepfather kept saying, "Now, parole model, I just want to warn you about something. You might not be able to do this. You're a girl, so your center of gravity is higher. I'm a boy, so my center of gravity is lower. Don't be too upset when I'm standing on the board longer than you. It's just science, okay? I'll be better, but it's okay because it's not your fault." Screw him. I managed to ride a few low waves all the way to shore while he couldn't even get on his feet. I mean, I wasn't doing anything fancy on those small waves since I'd never done it before, but it was way better than him trying to stand and falling instantly every single time. He wouldn't talk to me on the car ride back whenever I tried to bring up what he said earlier. Story 11. In a bustling corporate environment, there was an employee named Sarah, known for her sharp wit and assertive demeanor. She had a reputation for being the go-to person for solving complex problems and often took on leadership roles in projects. However, her rise to prominence wasn't solely due to her skills. Sarah had a knack for undermining her colleagues to make herself appear more competent. One of her favorite targets was Tom, a quiet and diligent worker who had recently joined the company. Tom was known for his meticulous attention to detail and his ability to complete tasks ahead of deadlines. Despite his impressive work ethic, Sarah often belittled him in meetings, dismissing his ideas and taking credit for his contributions. One day, the company announced a major project that would require a team of employees to collaborate closely. Sarah, eager to lead the project and further her career, quickly positioned herself as the team leader. Tom, despite his reservations, was assigned to the team. As the project progressed, Sarah continued her pattern of taking credit for Tom's work. She would present his ideas as her own in meetings and often praised herself for the team's successes while subtly blaming Tom for any setbacks. Tom, ever the professional, remained silent, focusing on delivering quality work. The turning point came during a critical presentation to the company's executives. Sarah had prepared the slides and was set to present the team's progress. However, just before the meeting, she fell ill and was unable to attend. In a twist of fate, Tom was asked to step in and deliver the presentation. With a calm demeanor and a well-prepared slide deck, Tom presented the team's work, highlighting the challenges they faced and the solutions they implemented. The executives were impressed by his clarity and depth of understanding. After the presentation, the CEO approached Tom and commended him for his exceptional work. Word of Tom's performance spread throughout the company, and soon he was recognized as a rising star. Sarah, on the other hand, found herself sidelined. Her previous actions had caught up with her, and colleagues began to distance themselves from her. The very tactics she had used to climb the corporate ladder had led to her downfall. In the end, Tom's integrity and dedication were rewarded, while Sarah's manipulative behavior led to her isolation. Story 12. Jake was the kind of guy who always thought he was entitled to everything. He worked at a busy downtown office where parking was scarce, and every spot was a prize. Every morning, Jake would speed into the parking lot like a man on a mission, cutting off other cars and taking spots before anyone else could get close. He'd also take up 2 spaces whenever possible because his car needed extra room. One day, the office manager installed a new security camera to monitor the parking lot after several complaints about reckless driving. Jake was warned once or twice, but he shrugged it off, thinking he was too clever to get caught or reprimanded. One rainy Monday, Jake rushed into the parking lot after a late meeting. The lot was packed, and every spot was taken except one at the very far end. Seeing this, Jake accelerated and cut off a car already pulling into a spot much closer to the building. The car's driver, a woman named Lisa, was furious. Lisa worked long hours as a nurse and was always exhausted. That parking spot was her only chance for a quick exit at the end of the day. She decided she wouldn't let Jake get away with it. That evening, Lisa stayed late and left just after Jake. She waited in the lot until Jake got into his car and started to back out. As he tried to reverse, Lisa suddenly pressed the car horn loudly. Surprised, Jake looked around and saw Lisa walking calmly toward her own car, clutching an umbrella. Suddenly, a security guard approached Jake and handed him a ticket. It turned out the parking lot had new rules. Anyone caught aggressive driving or improperly parking would get fined. The guard showed Jake the camera footage, which clearly showed him cutting off Lisa and taking 2 spaces. Jake's face turned red as he realized his selfish behavior had finally caught up with him. He paid the fine reluctantly and had to park further away for the next few weeks. Lisa smiled to herself, knowing that karma had finally delivered a lesson to the office bully. From then on, Jake drove carefully and stopped hogging parking spaces. Story 13. During the Green Bay vs. Seattle playoff game, I had a friend over who was a die-hard Packers fan. He started off pretty humble, but his attitude totally changed after the first score. He was convinced the Packers were going to the Super Bowl, and I kept reminding him that there was still plenty of time left in the game. At halftime, it was 16-0 for the Packers, and my friend was really boasting now, talking about how the Seahawks weren't crap and how his team was going to destroy whoever they played in the Super Bowl. Then the Seahawks scored on a fake field goal, but he didn't even flinch. "Doesn't matter, the game is over," he said. I reminded him again that there was still plenty of time left. He scoffed and kept yelling about the Super Bowl-bound Packers. Then, with around 5 minutes left, the Packers intercepted the ball and slid down on it. My friend went ballistic, crying and yelling things like, "Nobody believed we could do it," and "We're going to the boo-hoo." And then it happened. The Seahawks got within a touchdown and went for an onside kick to try and force overtime. And they got it. My friend's mood went from jubilation to total defeat. I always believed in not talking crap or boasting until the match is truly over, and I kept warning him about building that bad karma. He knew his team was done the second the Seahawks recovered that onside kick. Now, obviously no one really believes his karma caused the Packers to lose, but hey, maybe it helped. Story 14. A few years ago, I was working at this small retail store. There was this guy, let's call him Dave, total jerk, always rude to everyone, especially the staff. He thought he was better than everyone and would always cut in line or complain about the smallest things just to get attention. I hated dealing with him, but customer service is part of the job. One day, Dave comes in, really pissed about some product he bought a week ago. He's yelling at the cashier, making a scene. I was nearby stocking shelves and just wanted to get through the day. Anyway, Dave's being an absolute nightmare, yelling, throwing around insults, and demanding a full refund plus some free stuff. The manager tries to calm him down, but Dave's just not having it. Fast forward a bit, and guess what? A few weeks later, Dave comes back, but this time, it's a totally different story. He slips on the icy parking lot outside, breaks his wrist, and can't even get out of his car on his own. What's wild? The only people around to help him are the same cashiers he treated like garbage before. Instead of getting an attitude, they helped him right away, called an ambulance, and stayed with him until help came. I heard from one of the cashiers that Dave actually apologized and told them he realized how crappy he'd been. Story 15. I have to tell you about this one experience I had that perfectly fits the whole karma is a bish vibe. It happened a few years ago, and honestly, even now when I think about it, it still feels so satisfying. So, I was applying for a job at this really reputable company, a place I'd dreamed of working at for a while. The interview process was intense. I went through a phone screening, an in-person interview, and then I got called back for a final round where I met with the team lead and the HR manager. From the start, things didn't feel right. The HR manager was rude, barely making eye contact, and seemed annoyed when I asked questions about the role. The team leader, on the other hand, was very formal and didn't try to hide that he was unimpressed by my resume. During the interview, they peppered me with impossible questions and barely gave me time to answer. It was like they were trying to intimidate me or trip me up. A few days later, I got an email saying I didn't get the job. Fine, it stung, but I wasn't devastated. What annoyed me more was that the HR manager's tone was condescending, almost like rubbing salt in the wound. I couldn't help but feel like they'd written me off unfairly because I didn't come from the right background. Fast forward about 6 months. I'm working somewhere else, but a friend who works at that same company tells me that the HR manager and the team leader are both in hot water. Apparently, the HR manager had been caught manipulating candidate feedback and bullying interns. The team leader was discovered to have been stealing company resources and abusing his position. The company launched an internal investigation, and both got fired abruptly. Here's the kicker. The company posted new openings after the firings, and they actually reached out to me, specifically mentioning they'd like me to reapply because the previous hiring round had some internal issues. The same company that had basically brushed me off was now actively courting me. Long story short, I reapplied, went through the interview again, and got hired. The whole experience was so surreal. It felt like karma served those two a big plate of justice, and I got the last laugh. Sometimes, people who think they're untouchable get exactly what they deserve, and it reminds me that treating others with respect really matters, no matter your position. Story 16. My friend Sarah was invited to this big birthday party thrown by a girl from her work. Let's call her Jessica. Jessica was known for being super fake and a bit of a drama queen, always trying to one-up everyone. At the party, Jessica was acting like the queen of the world, bragging non-stop about her designer stuff, her exclusive contacts, and how amazing her life was. Now Sarah is chill and not really into that whole show-off vibe, but she was polite enough. Throughout the night, Jessica kept making passive-aggressive comments towards Sarah, like, "Oh, you're here? Didn't expect you to come. And wow, that outfit is interesting." Then things got wild. Jessica decided to surprise everyone with a karaoke contest. She was so sure she would win, because she had the loudest voice and the flashiest moves. When it was her turn, she grabbed the mic and started singing, but halfway through, the power went out. Total blackout. Everyone's phones lit up the room, but the speakers were dead, and Jessica's big moment turned into an awkward silent performance. Here's where karma struck. The power outage was because Jessica's so-called exclusive DJ had accidentally unplugged the main circuit, trying to connect his phone. It wasn't a big deal for anyone else, but for Jessica, it was the ultimate party fail. To add insult to injury, Sarah casually pulled out a Bluetooth speaker from her bag and started playing music for everyone, turning the mood around. She ended up being the life of the party, all without the drama. Jessica left early, clearly embarrassed. Meanwhile, Sarah got a bunch of new friends and a funny story to tell about how karma took down the party queen. Story 17. A few years ago, I was working at a mid-sized marketing firm. We had a colleague, Tom, who was notorious for taking credit for others' work. He had a knack for swooping in at the last minute, adding a minor tweak to a project, and then presenting it to management as if he had done the bulk of the work. One day, our team was working on a major campaign for a high-profile client. Everyone was putting in extra hours, brainstorming ideas, and refining the strategy. I had developed a unique concept that the team loved and decided to present it in our upcoming meeting. The night before the presentation, I stayed late to finalize the slides. I saved the file on our shared drive and went home, feeling confident. The next morning, I opened the presentation to do a final review and was shocked to see that my slides had been altered. My concept was still there, but the credit slide now listed Tom as the lead creator. I was furious but decided to stay calm. I approached our manager and explained the situation, showing her the history of the file, which clearly indicated my original work and the subsequent changes made by Tom. She was taken aback and assured me she'd handle it. During the meeting, our manager asked me to present the campaign. I walked through the concept, detailing the strategy and creative elements. At the end, she addressed the team, highlighting the importance of integrity and collaboration. She then revealed the version history issue and emphasized that credit should be given where it's due. Tom was visibly embarrassed. After the meeting, he was called into a private discussion with HR. A week later, he was reassigned to a different department with less collaborative work. The rest of the team felt a renewed sense of trust and camaraderie. Story 18. This happened during my final year at university. We had a huge group project that would count for 40% of our final grade. Naturally, everyone took it seriously. Well, almost everyone. In our group of 5, there was one guy. Let's call him Ray. Ray barely showed up for meetings, never replied to messages, and submitted garbage work when we gave him something small to do. The rest of us basically carried the entire project. We had screenshots, meeting logs, GitHub contributions, everything to show that Ray didn't do anything. The night before the submission, we all met up to finalize the paper. Ray showed up late, stayed for 10 minutes, then said, "I'm tired, just put my name on it and submit." We were all furious. But here's where karma stepped in. After we submitted the project, we were told that we'd also be having individual evaluations with the professor. At first, Ray thought it was just a formality. But we came prepared. Each of us separately brought in proof that Ray didn't contribute. Screenshots, logs, messages. The professor was shocked and asked Ray about it. Ray tried to lie, saying, "They're just mad because I didn't do things their way." But his story completely unraveled when the professor pulled up the GitHub commit logs and saw Ray's name only appeared once, to misspell a comment. End result, the rest of us got A's. Ray failed the class and didn't graduate that semester. I heard later he had to take a summer course just to get his degree and wasn't allowed in another group project without staff supervision. Group projects suck, but karma is sweet. Story 19. I had been working at the prestigious art gallery, Elysian Frames, for nearly a decade. Nestled in the heart of the city, the gallery was renowned for showcasing contemporary masterpieces and hosting exclusive exhibitions. Our clientele ranged from affluent art collectors to celebrities looking for the next statement piece for their mansions. Then came Adrian, a charismatic, well-dressed man in his early 30s who joined our team as the new sales director. With a resume boasting stints at renowned galleries in Paris and New York, he seemed like a valuable addition. His eloquence and charm quickly won over clients and colleagues alike. However, beneath his polished exterior, something felt off. He was overly inquisitive about sales figures, artist contracts, and even the personal lives of staff members. While it's natural to get acquainted with a new workplace, Adrian's curiosity bordered on intrusive. A few months into his tenure, discrepancies began to surface. A significant piece, a mixed media sculpture valued at $250,000, went missing. The security footage showed Adrian handling the piece, claiming it was being moved for a private viewing. However, there was no record of such an appointment. When questioned, Adrian provided a convoluted explanation involving a high-profile client who demanded discretion. Management, eager not to offend a potential buyer, accepted his story. But the missing sculpture was just the tip of the iceberg. Artists began complaining about delayed payments. Clients reported unauthorized charges and unfulfilled orders. The gallery's reputation began to suffer. Determined to uncover the truth, I began my own investigation. I spent late nights combing through transaction records, cross-referencing sales, and interviewing staff. Patterns emerged. Artwork sold without proper documentation, funds diverted to unknown accounts, and a trail that led straight to Adrian. Armed with evidence, I approached the gallery's owner, Ms. Langford. A formidable woman with a keen eye for detail, she was both shocked and enraged by the revelations. Together, we devised a plan to confront Adrian without alerting him. We organized a faux exhibition, inviting esteemed clients and media. The centerpiece was to be a newly acquired painting by a renowned artist. Unbeknownst to Adrian, the painting was a decoy embedded with a GPS tracker. As anticipated, the night before the exhibition, the painting vanished. The tracker led us to a storage facility registered under a shell company. Inside, we found not only the decoy, but also several other missing artworks. Law enforcement was notified, and Adrian was arrested. The ensuing investigation revealed a sophisticated art theft ring, with Adrian at its helm, exploiting his position to pilfer and resell artworks on the black market. The scandal rocked the art world. Headlines screamed of betrayal and deception. However, the gallery's swift action and transparency helped salvage its reputation. Artists and clients returned, reassured by the measures we implemented to prevent future breaches. Adrian faced multiple charges, including grand larceny, fraud, and conspiracy. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison, his charm and charisma now confined behind bars. Story 20. I used to work at a high-end boutique hotel in the city's financial district. It was one of those places where wealthy business travelers and celebrities stayed when they wanted privacy and luxury. The hotel prides itself on exceptional service and strict confidentiality. One summer, a famous pop star checked in under a fake name to avoid paparazzi. The staff was sworn to secrecy, and the hotel went to great lengths to ensure no one knew of their presence. Among the staff was a bellhop named Jake, who was relatively new but eager to prove himself. Jake, however, had a habit of gossiping and bragging about the famous guests to his friends outside. He thought it was harmless, just a little fun. But word traveled fast in the city, and soon a tabloid journalist got wind of the pop star's presence. One evening, while the pop star was resting in their suite, a swarm of paparazzi showed up outside the hotel, snapping photos and shouting questions. The hotel security struggled to keep them at bay. The pop star was furious and demanded to speak with the management. The hotel's general manager launched an immediate investigation. It didn't take long before the source of the leak was uncovered, Jake. When confronted, Jake denied everything at first, but eventually broke down and confessed. He said he never intended harm. He just wanted to sound important among his friends. The management had a serious talk with Jake, explaining how his carelessness had compromised the hotel's reputation and endangered their guests' privacy. They gave him a final warning, but kept him on the staff with the hope that he had learned his lesson. But karma wasn't done yet. About 2 weeks later, Jake was assigned to assist another high-profile guest, an extremely private billionaire entrepreneur. This guest was known for being notoriously difficult and had strict no-phone policies in their suite. Jake was helping carry luggage when he accidentally dropped the billionaire's expensive smartphone, cracking the screen. Panicking, he tried to hide the damage, hoping the guest wouldn't notice. Unfortunately, the billionaire discovered the cracked phone the next morning. Instead of reacting calmly, the billionaire decided to file a formal complaint and demanded Jake's immediate dismissal. The hotel couldn't afford to risk losing such an important client, so Jake was let go the very next day. Story 21. A couple of years ago, I was invited to a friend's birthday party at a local bar. The birthday girl, let's call her Sarah, was known for throwing wild parties, and this one was no exception. It was packed, loud, and full of people having a great time. I wasn't super close to Sarah, but went along because I was friends with a few people there. Early in the evening, a guy named Dustin showed up. Dustin had a reputation in the group for being kind of a jerk, always bragging about himself, cutting lines, and generally acting entitled. On this night, he decided to crank that behavior up to 11. He pushed his way to the front of the line at the bar multiple times, cutting in front of others. When someone politely called him out, he laughed and told them to chill out, because it was the birthday party and he deserved a drink. People rolled their eyes but tried to ignore him. Later, Dustin started flirting aggressively with Sarah, who was clearly not interested. She politely told him to back off, but Dustin kept pushing, making her uncomfortable. Eventually, Sarah's close friend stepped in and asked him to leave. Dustin scoffed and stormed off, promising he'd be back to show everyone how to party. The party went on, and as the night got later, the bar started to get crowded. Dustin tried to sneak back in, but the bouncer recognized him from earlier trouble and refused to let him inside. Dustin started shouting, calling the bouncer names and threatening to ruin the party. Just then, the birthday girl, Sarah, got on the mic and announced that she'd arranged for a limo to take everyone to an after-party spot. Everyone cheered, except Dustin, who was left outside fuming. As the limo pulled away, Dustin tried to flag down a taxi, but the street was busy, and he kept getting ignored. After about 30 minutes, soaked from a sudden rainstorm and humiliated from being left out, he gave up and went home. Meanwhile, the party moved to the after spot, and everyone had an amazing time. Sarah thanked her friends for standing up for her and said the party was one of the best she'd ever had. The next day, someone texted me a photo that was taken outside the bar of Dustin slipping on a wet patch on the sidewalk and falling flat on his back, right in front of a huge crowd. It quickly went viral within the group chat. No one felt sorry for him. The consensus was that he brought it on himself with his attitude. Story 22. I used to work at a grocery store, and there was this one customer who was a nightmare. She would always cut in line, snap at cashiers, and complain about everything, no matter how small. One day, she came up to my register, yelling about how slow the line was and demanding a manager. I stayed calm and called my manager over, who politely explained the situation and asked her to be patient. The lady refused and kept ranting. Eventually, the manager asked her to either wait or leave. Then, just as she was about to storm off, her phone slipped out of her hand and shattered on the floor. She freaked out, shouting even more. One of my co-workers, trying to lighten the mood, jokingly said, "Guess that's what you get for being so rough." To everyone's surprise, the lady just froze, then mumbled an apology and quietly left the store without buying anything. Later, we found out from the manager that the lady had a history of being difficult at multiple stores nearby. It felt like karma finally caught up with her. She came in to make a scene but ended up embarrassed and empty-handed. Story 23. This happened a few years ago during a massive snowstorm in the area I had recently moved to. Having lived in a desert state my whole life before that, I was completely unaccustomed to driving in such conditions. Fortunately, my partner and I had finished work around the same time that night, around 9 p.m., and he stopped by my workplace so I could follow him home through the storm. Enter the jackass driver. My partner and I were driving very slowly, with our hazard lights flashing, because the storm was so intense and it was pitch dark outside. Suddenly, this reckless driver started tailgating me for miles, revving his engine and flashing his high beams, making me even more nervous than I already was. Then, fed up, the driver decided to pass me. He sped up and whipped around to the other lane, but failed to notice a deer standing on the side of the road. Traveling at about 45 miles per hour, he smashed head-on into the deer. He immediately had to pull over and wait for a tow truck. I guess that's exactly what happens when you act like a jackass during a winter storm. Story 24. I wanted to share a recent experience, though it might get overlooked. I recently ended my relationship with my girlfriend due to her escalating issues with alcohol and her persistent denial of the problem. The final incident that led to the breakup was a night when she went out alone, became extremely intoxicated, and didn't return home until around 7 a.m. She gave me a detailed story about running into old friends at the bar and then stopping at Whataburger to sober up, which explained her late return. However, I lacked the patience to deal with the situation, so I decided to end the relationship. A couple of weeks later, we started talking again, and I realized how much I missed her, especially her captivating eyes. She expressed her love for me sincerely, and I found myself seriously considering reconciliation. But before doing so, I knew I had to address the drinking issue. When I brought up the night of the breakup, she immediately became defensive. Sensing that something was wrong, I gently pressed for the truth, using a classic tactic of suggesting I had more information than I actually did, encouraging her to be honest. Eventually, she confessed that on that night at the bar, while drunk, a man she had never met before offered to buy her Whataburger. She accepted, ate, and then slept with him in the parking lot. I was stunned by this revelation, though. In hindsight, I probably should have expected it. Had I known, I might have just given her Whataburger gift cards instead of investing my time in the relationship. To conclude the night, I offered to help her get home, but she refused, trying to convince me to come back with her to talk. I declined, fought past her attempts to hold me back, got on my motorcycle, said, "Have a nice life," and left. The next morning, I found out that less than 30 minutes after we parted, she drank heavily again, was arrested, and was charged with a DUI. I only learned this because she attempted to use me to make a call from jail. Instant karma, indeed. Story 25. During a recent trip to Orlando to visit Disney and other theme parks, I took advantage of the relatively low prices on video games compared to my home country. At Best Buy, I purchased 2 games, but the cashier only scanned one. I considered informing him, to be honest, but ultimately, I chose not to, effectively obtaining a $60 discount unintentionally. Later that same day, I visited Hollywood Studios. Unfortunately, I didn't pay attention to the signs about the special Halloween event that evening. I entered the park with a regular ticket, only to realize later that it was invalid for the event. I spent about an hour waiting in line for the rock and roller coaster, but when it began raining, the ride was closed. I hoped to enjoy some indoor attractions, but all were closed due to the Halloween festivities, which required a separate ticket. As a result, my ticket for the day was essentially wasted. Despite these mistakes, I experienced a series of other events during the trip that made me question the concept of karma. Story 26. A few years ago, I worked at a popular restaurant. There was this regular customer, a guy who always acted like he owned the place. He'd come in, order complicated drinks, and then complain loudly if they weren't made exactly right. One time, he even started yelling at the staff because his fries weren't hot enough. Everyone hated dealing with him, but management just smiled and let it slide because he tipped generously. One night, the restaurant was packed, and this guy came in late and tried to cut the line at the bar. The bartender told him politely to wait like everyone else, but he ignored her and started yelling. Things escalated quickly. The guy got louder and more belligerent, cursing and threatening to never come back. Then, right in the middle of his tirade, he suddenly choked on a bite of food. It was serious. He couldn't breathe and was turning red in the face. No one was prepared, but luckily one of the cooks knew the Heimlich maneuver and jumped in. After a tense moment, the guy coughed up the food and started breathing again. Everyone was silent for a moment, then the bartender said, "Maybe next time, don't be such an A." The guy was so embarrassed and shaken that he apologized and left without another word. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.